There's some more details, of course, and feedback from the conclusions of the third Financing for Development Conference. Dr. Githinji Gitahi is the CEO of the African Medical Research Foundation, or AMREF, as it's more commonly known around here. He's in studio with me right now. Dr. Gitahi, let's start with your broad impressions of the outcome of the conference. What did you make of the conclusions?
Well, I think the conclusions were fairly expected and fairly guided, and I think basically what the international community is saying is that we may have very good intentions of alleviating poverty, improving social welfare of our people, but unless we have a proper, sustainable financing plan, it cannot be done. So I think for the conference to focus so much and come up with kind of resolutions, you call them guiding resolutions, for financing for future sustainable goals, for me, it was a positive thing, and I think it ended pretty well.
Indeed. This conference also did not come out with a deal to set up a global tax body. In your opinion, how big a setback is that in efforts to tighten tax administration and make it more efficient, to get the money that we need to get this development off the ground?
In my view, the real issue is how governments implement the outcome of the discussions, because it is very difficult, and I can see where the negotiators were coming from. It's very difficult to set up a legislative tax body or a tax body that has teeth or can actually make countries comply, because different countries have different tax regimes, they have different plans, there are different levels. So for me, using the existing UN body to say, let us make tax a key priority on the table, so that we can keep encouraging. And the countries that were represented really came down and said, we are willing to do this. And the main reason is that the development world, or the development agencies, have discovered, and this has always been known, that really the real movers of change in developing countries, in the least developed countries, is mobilizing local resources, which is really public resources through tax. But enforcing it is the role of each government. Each government has legislation. Each government has a tax regime to enforce. So it is now saying that we can't get a tax body, but the world can rally together to assist each other to achieve proper tax compliance in their countries. So for me, I don't think the lack of a tax body is a real setback. The discussion is actually a beginning of the countries to rethink how they implement their tax regimes.
Okay, what about interim measures? Because one of the ideas that the OECD and the United Nations Development Programme came with to the table was this idea of a tax inspectors without borders plan, which would essentially allow tax inspectors from, say, OECD countries to come to, say, Kenya and help authorities here implement tax audits to figure out who's not paying their taxes and why. Do you think that will work as an interim measure to stem the outflow of capital?
I think really, if you listen to the debate, the real issue about tax is, in my view, is divided into two. There is one, countries have tax regimes for their people, for raising their own GDP, and they come to their people and say, this is the tax regime, and this is what you need to keep into. That's for citizens. But then there are a lot of multinational companies that operate in each of these developing countries and least developed countries. And the key issue is there. And that was a big debate, that because you look at all these companies and the question is there proper tax accountability for the multinationals? Are they declaring their tax? Is there good practice, business practice? What you call proper transfer pricing, that if you're selling goods in a least developed country or a developing country, are you declaring the full costing structure of those goods that allows the government in that country to then charge tax accordingly? Are you declaring ownership, or are you transferring dividends in a way that is visible, that is transparent? And that is the role I see for the kind of the short-term measure or the interim measures, to try and help governments to understand and to share excellence, so that these tax supervisors can come and say they're not going to enforce tax in any country. I don't see anybody coming to Kenya or going to Uganda or Tanzania and enforcing tax for citizens. But it is about advising government and saying, we were in Uganda and we think there's a problem with company X and we want to expose this and let you know, so that you're able to then supervise it and look at it further. So it has a role, but the role is really advisory. The role is really like a whistleblower almost, to bring up issues that the government can look at. Yeah. So again, it's a good step. It is not legislative. Government will have to play along, because again, you want to ask yourself, or you want to really believe that the governments have the best interests of the people at heart, that the governments are putting policies to ensure they collect maximum tax as possible, and also that they have no conflict of interest in this. So this body is really to give information, and the government to decide what to do with it.
All right, one last question for you, sir. How much do we know and how much do we not know about the sheer scale of tax evasion and avoidance across sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, I think the estimate, I don't want to give any figures, but the estimates are huge. Right now, I think in total development aid across the world is probably $132 billion. Estimates are tax evasion across countries is really more than this. So I don't want to give any details in terms of Kenya and by country, but it is huge. And the real question is, if this was about to be collected, then development aid that comes could be used to build other things. So really, it is big. And I think it is right for the world to think, before the September meeting of discussing how to take sustainable development goals ahead, it is right for the world to start thinking that the role of really creating and maintaining sustainable goals is the role of the government of the people, where the people live. The development agencies, the development countries that have, are developed, are just going to come and assist. But the tax evasion thing is big, and it can actually close the gap significantly. All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for your inputs. That's Dr. Githinji Gitahi, he's the CEO of AMREF. He was with me in studio, of course, talking about the conclusions from the third Financing for Development conference that just wrapped up in the Ethiopian capital.